The night sky lit up with fire as the United States fighter jets roared into action, unleashing a strike that reduced a secret cartel fentanyl lab to rubble in seconds. This was America's power in full display in the war with cartels. With fentanyl overdoses now killing more than 84,000 Americans every year, the stakes have never been higher. Is this the beginning of something much bigger? And how far will the United States go to crush the cartels once and for all? Join us as we find out just how far America is willing to go in its battle against the fentanyl crisis. At 30,000 feet, 12 F-22 Raptors move across the sky like shadows. No sound trails behind them, and no warning betrays their approach. On radar screens, they are ghosts. Far below, hidden beneath a thick canopy, a billion-dollar fentanyl complex runs without pause, relying on terrain and secrecy for protection. But this is not a mission of bullets or firefights. What follows is not noise or spectacle, but a strike shaped by silence and exact control. The F-22 was built to vanish. Its edges are cut to deflect radar, and the skin of the jet is layered with special coatings that swallow signals before they can return to the source. Even the engines are buried behind curved ducts that keep reflections from giving away their position. Decades of engineering produced a jet that slips through modern defenses as if they were never there. Avoiding detection is more than just shape and coating. The F-22 manages its heat output so efficiently that infrared sensors read little more than background air. Radio chatter is cut to almost nothing. When pilots do communicate, it is through encrypted bursts so short they vanish in a blink. Secure satellites carry their data, separate from civilian networks, ensuring nothing leaks into the open. Every system works toward the same goal: get close, strike, and disappear. Each Raptor carries 2 GBU-39 small-diameter bombs. At 250 pounds each, they are compact but devastatingly accurate. GPS guidance steers them to within 3 feet of a target. If jamming disrupts the signal, laser guidance finishes the job. The smaller size of the bomb allows Raptors to carry more weapons without compromising stealth, and the focus blast means a single building can be destroyed without flattening everything around it. The chosen target sits deep in Sinaloa's wilderness. Workers in masks handle chemicals inside a facility capable of producing enough fentanyl to kill tens of millions. For years, the jungle's cover kept sites like this out of reach. That advantage is gone. Synthetic aperture radar can now pierce clouds in the canopy. Thermal sensors pick up the faint glow of generators. Intercepted communications map the hierarchy of cartel leaders. Tools first used against terror networks in Afghanistan and Iraq now turn against organized crime with the same precision. With the target confirmed, the command is given: execute. The Raptors close in, still invisible to Mexican radar. 24 bombs drop at once, falling clean through the sky without trails or thunder. Gravity pulls them down, guided all the way to the mark. The first explosion tears into the heart of the compound, shaking the jungle for miles. The second touches off chemical storage tanks, setting off a chain reaction that rips the site apart. In a matter of seconds, the billion-dollar facility is reduced to a crater of scorched earth and twisted debris. What once fueled global trade is gone. By the time local security forces respond, the jets have vanished. Radar never registered them. The skies look untouched. The only sign comes from intercepted cartel messages, frantic voices repeating a single phrase: they know where we are. This is stealth warfare, no spectacle, no drawn-out exchange. Just the certainty that when the strike comes, it is sudden, silent, and final. Then the Raptors vanish once more, leaving only fear in the silence overhead. The crater in Sinaloa was more than the destruction of one lab. It signaled the unraveling of empires crafted by men who believed terrain and corruption made them untouchable. These were not street dealers. They were architects of billion-dollar syndicates that operated like shadow governments. But who were the minds behind these fortresses that defied states for decades? Rafael Caro Quintero earned the title Narco of Narcos by rewriting the playbook of the drug trade. In the 1980s, this Sinaloa native did not simply move cocaine. He engineered the first major pipeline linking Colombian cartels through Mexican corridors into American cities. His Guadalajara cartel became the prototype for every organization that followed. Ruthless violence fused with logistical discipline, shifting narcotics from street sales to industrial-scale distribution. Quintero's empire collapsed after one fatal miscalculation. DEA agent Enrique Camarena uncovered too much: routes, contacts, and operations. In retaliation, cartel gunmen abducted him, and after 30 hours of torture, left his body sealed in plastic. The 1985 murder triggered international outrage and a manhunt that ended with Quintero locked in prison. But prison was temporary. In 2013, a Mexican court freed him on a legal technicality. At 60, instead of fading into retirement, he vanished into Sinaloa's mountains. From bunkers carved into rock, he rebuilt operations with satellite internet, encrypted devices, and tunnel systems that allowed entire networks to function unseen. The Trevino Morales brothers added a new terrifying dimension. Miguel, Z40, and Omar, Z42, were not traditional traffickers. Both were elite soldiers from Mexico's special forces who deserted to form the backbone of Los Zetas. Years of military discipline had reshaped the cartel into something more than a criminal outfit. It became a paramilitary machine. Under the Zetas' command came armored trucks, night vision gear, and assaults so well coordinated they looked like full-scale military operations. More deserters were drawn to their ranks, and what started as an enforcement arm soon grew into one of the most feared cartels Mexico had ever seen. They didn't stop at drug trafficking. Kidnapping, human smuggling, and extortion became part of their empire, spreading fear across entire states. Even when the leaders were locked behind bars, their power reached out through coded notes and corrupt officials who carried out orders on the outside. And then there was Vicente Carrillo Fuentes, another figure who carried on a legacy of blood and violence. When his brother Amado, the Lord of the Skies, died during botched plastic surgery in 1997, Vicente inherited the Juarez cartel. He turned Ciudad Juarez into one of the deadliest battlefields of the 21st century. Between 2008 and 2012, more than 10,000 lives were claimed as rival cartels clashed for control of the Juarez-El Paso crossings. These bridges were gateways worth billions, where every shipment into the United States represented fortunes. For Vicente, geography decided everything. To lock down his territory, he bought off police forces, slipped money into judges' pockets, and secured protection from officials who should have stood against him. Violence was the tool he used to strike fear, but corruption was the armor that made him untouchable. These weren't street thugs. They operated on another level. They raised armies, taxed whole communities, enforced their own rules, and built black market economies strong enough to rival real governments. The strength of their empires was buried out of sight. Their labs were dug in and fortified, run like clockwork with crews rotating around the clock. Generators kept the power steady, cutting off outside eyes. And when the pressure came from law enforcement, escape tunnels gave their bosses a clean way out. The structures they designed and perfected became blueprints for the cartels that dominate today. Intelligence reports estimate the Sinaloa and Jalisco New Generation cartels now control more than 60% of global fentanyl production, operating on frameworks designed by Quintero, the Treviños, and Carrillo Fuentes. These networks endured assassinations, arrests, and full-scale military campaigns, reshaping themselves into syndicates strong enough to survive long after their founders were gone. For years, these masterminds believed their mountains and alliances rendered them immune to outside power. But surveillance satellites, synthetic aperture radar, and thermal imaging were already sketching bullseyes over the facilities they thought could never be touched. The men who built cartel empires believed their mountain strongholds and political protection made them untouchable. For decades, they lived as though hidden in plain sight. What they didn't see coming was that the same technology once aimed at Moscow's missile fields would eventually turn south, peeling back every layer of secrecy they thought would last forever. The U-2 Dragon Lady still climbs into the sky at dawn, its long wings flexing as engines push the aircraft towards 70,000 feet. In the Cold War, this spy plane brought back photos of nuclear launch sites deep inside Soviet territory. Now its cameras pivot toward Mexico, where its lenses read license plates and track convoys through cartel countries, all while the aircraft stays legally outside the border. On paper, it looks like a routine patrol, In reality, it's one of the most sophisticated intelligence missions of America's modern drug war. Washington doesn't wait. Where there was one flight a month, there are suddenly nearly 20 in less than 2 weeks. Aircraft designed to track submarines beneath Arctic ice or missiles across Siberia are redirected to the deserts and jungles of the Americas. The Cold War arsenal has found a new enemy. The Navy's P-8 Poseidon, a maritime hunter built to stalk Russian subs across the Pacific, now sweeps over the borderlands. Its sensor pods, worth more than the annual defense budget of some nations, can crack encrypted radios, listen in from hundreds of miles, and cut through storms or darkness to reveal facilities long thought invisible. The same technology that once searched for steel hulls beneath the polar seas now exposes fentanyl labs hidden under jungle canopy. Then comes the breakthrough: synthetic aperture radar. Instead of photographs, it builds maps by bouncing radio waves off the ground, revealing tunnels, airstrips, and bunkers that standard surveillance can't touch. Cartel compounds carved into mountains appear on American screens with the kind of detail engineers once reserved for Soviet launch silos. Drones join the hunt. Predators redeployed from Middle Eastern battlefields circle quietly over the South, listening for every whisper of digital life. Cell phones, satellite links, and encrypted apps are all vacuumed up and processed before cartel leaders even realize their messages were sent. What once felt like secure communication now betrays them with every call. The shock inside cartel ranks is instant. Intercepts show bosses abandoning long-used safe houses overnight, convinced the walls themselves are betraying them. No matter how often the convoys change their routes, satellites still manage to track them with exact precision. The remote terrain that once kept them hidden now works against them, turning those same stretches of land into perfect targets for strikes launched from far away. Thermal imaging reads the heat of workers laboring in bunkers. Signals intelligence turns encrypted satellite phones into glowing beacons for American operators. What criminals built as fortresses now serve as targets. For cartels, the message is unmistakable. The invisible have become visible. The tools built to keep superpowers in check are now dismantling their empires, one coordinate at a time. The hunters were now the hunted. Tools once built for Cold War standoffs had been repurposed, aimed not at Moscow but at Mexico's mountains. Is this setting the stage for a political gamble that would redraw the lines of America's war on crime? On January 20th, 2025, Donald Trump signed an order in the Oval Office that formally reclassified Mexican cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. The move shifted their legal standing from criminal groups to the same category as organizations such as ISIS and Al-Qaeda. The consequences were immediate. Intelligence agencies gained new authority for covert action, untethered from law enforcement's red tape. The Pentagon could apply the same counterterrorism playbook once used in Iraq and Afghanistan, this time on cartel targets just across the border. What had been a fight against crime became, legally, a war. For anyone tied to cartel networks, the designation was a nightmare. Prosecutors could now pursue terrorism charges not just for drug smuggling, but for anything deemed material support. Paying protection money, running goods through cartel corridors, and even sending family cash back home risked being recast as aiding terrorists, an offense carrying decades in prison. The first test case came quickly. Maria del Rosario Navarro Sanchez, a 39-year-old Mexican woman accused of supplying grenades to the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, was indicted as a terrorism supporter. Her golden AR-15 rifle, nicknamed El Dorado, was paraded in court as proof. The shock rippled through cartel ranks as lawyers realized the old rules of prosecution no longer applied. Trump wielded more than law. At dawn, he turned to Twitter, threatening 25% tariffs on all Mexican imports unless President Claudia Sheinbaum crushed the cartels. With $400 billion in annual trade on the line, the threat landed like a hammer. For Mexico's leaders, the past was never far away. The United States' 1914 occupation of Veracruz remained a raw memory, taught in schools, retold in family stories, and embedded in the country's politics. The sight of American forces massing at the border, captured in new satellite images, stirred those memories. Inside Sheinbaum's cabinet, comparisons to Veracruz surfaced in hushed conversations. Some warned that history had a way of circling back when least expected. In public, Sheinbaum projected defiance. Before the cameras, she denounced Washington's threats and promised that Mexico would not be bullied into submission. Her words struck the right chord for evening newscasts, giving anxious citizens the sense that their president would not bend to outside pressure. Privately, the situation was far more delicate. Trump's warnings hinted at direct military action, and the weight of those threats could not be ignored. In a calculated move, Sheinbaum authorized limited United States surveillance flights from a discreet airfield outside Mexico City. It was a concession meant to cool tempers in Washington without stirring outrage at home. The response escalated. 10,000 Mexican troops poured into the northern states, chasing the same targets Washington wanted destroyed. Behind the scenes, foreign ministers scrambled to keep diplomacy alive. Then came the shock move. Before dawn, Mexican authorities extracted 29 cartel bosses from prisons across the country. Rafael Caro Quintero, the narco of narcos, whose killing of DEA agent Enrique Camarena had poisoned relations for decades, was put on a plane. Alongside him were Vicente Carrillo Fuentes of the Juarez Cartel and the Trevino Morales brothers of Los Zetas. It was a logistical feat that looked like something from wartime. Simultaneous transfers, heavy escorts, and United States aircraft standing by to scatter prisoners to 8 different cities under federal indictment. It was also unprecedented. Mexico had always extradited piecemeal after years of legal wrangling. Sending 29 kingpins in one sweep reeked of desperation, but it worked. Trump announced a temporary freeze on tariffs, praising Mexico's cooperation while demanding further crackdowns, especially on fentanyl production. The message was clear. The cartels were no longer just criminals. They were enemies of the state, and the rules of engagement had changed. But rules on paper are one thing. Outcomes on the ground are another. When the United States government decided to label Mexican cartels as foreign terrorist organizations, it gave officials new powers to go after them. For the first time, the United States could use military-style tactics that had previously only been used against groups like Al-Qaeda overseas. The first big action was an airstrike on a Sinaloa cartel drug lab. Right away, signs of disruption appeared. Communications showed that cartel commanders abandoned safe houses they had used for years. Supply convoys stopped running on normal routes because drivers feared being spotted from above. Even secure drug labs were left empty. Workers realized that bunkers and underground sites could not protect them from satellite-guided bombs. United States monitoring of cartel radio traffic showed leaders becoming more secretive, using codes and limiting their communication out of fear it could be tracked. This fear spread quickly. Rival leaders accused each other of working with United States intelligence, which led to violent internal purges. In Culiacan, killings rose sharply from 39 a month to 116 by October 2024, according to Insight Crime. Groups also took advantage of the chaos to fight over territory. Analysts said that trust inside the cartels was breaking down. Some cartel members who had once obeyed orders without hesitation began to grow uneasy, fearing their movements, and safe houses were already known. That hesitation chipped away at discipline and made it harder for the groups to stay organized. Meanwhile, the United States pressure started to show results. In early 2025, the DEA announced record-breaking drug seizures, nearly 10,000 kilograms of fentanyl and more than 50,000 kilograms of methamphetamine, the highest amounts ever documented. Diplomatic moves soon followed. The United States paused planned tariffs for 30 days after Mexico deployed 10,000 troops to border regions and handed over 29 cartel leaders to United States custody. These moves opened space for deeper cooperation between the two governments. Cartels found ways to adapt. Some groups started looking beyond the United States, shifting more operations toward Europe and Asia. There were reports of drones being tested, either for keeping watch or for possible attacks. Others began working on cyber tools meant to interfere with government systems. Smuggling routes changed as well. More shipments went by sea through Central America, often hidden in submersibles or fast boats. Small planes were used for airdrops in desert regions, a way to dodge the satellite tracking that made land routes more dangerous. Leaders also spread out power across different cells so that One raid couldn't take down the whole network. The fentanyl crisis is still one of the biggest battles America faces. In 2024, more than 84,000 people died from overdoses, a number that shows how deep the problem runs. Experts point out that as long as people keep searching for these drugs, traffickers will always find ways to supply them. But there are signs of a shift. United States forces are no longer just responding to cartel moves. They're shutting down labs, intercepting submarines packed with drugs, and breaking up networks before shipments reach American soil. At the same time, new investments are going into treatment, mental health services, and rebuilding communities, steps that cut off the demand cartels depend on. The fight isn't over, but for the first time, America looks like it's gaining the upper hand. The cartels are under pressure, and the momentum is starting to turn. Thanks for watching. While you are still here, click on the link on your screen to check out another of our videos. See you there.